Okay. Hey. So, take a look at the review for Washington's War after having played it. And, well, the first thing I can say, I want to talk about the components again. Nice hard map. This is the designer deluxe treatment from GMT. Good counters. Problem with the double-sided ones that aren't properly double-sided. Cards, the stiffness is a problem. I misspoke earlier. I felt a little less stiff maybe, I don't know. Real painful to shuffle. And even though there's this huge deck, you do have to reshuffle it a couple of times. There are cards in there that trigger reshuffles. Reshuffling a big deck like this, if it's, softer cards like came with Magic the Gathering, is annoying, tedious. You have to spread out a lot of cards and shuffle them and, split decks and shuffle and shuffle and shuffle. When the cards are painful to shuffle, it's a real problem. Arching the bridge with these, my wrists just kill me. Sometimes big clumps fall all at once. I know I'm not getting a good shuffle. And I don't like doing the more traditional shuffle. It doesn't feel like it mixes things up as well when I do it. Maybe I'm just not good at it. Anyway. What about the rules? You know what I didn't even mention last time? You come with one of these playbooks. Most of which is sadly an example of why. That's 11 pages. Beautifully illustrated color. The rule book is even better because the color is used a little bit more sparingly. Yeah, I'd rather there not be any color, obviously. Player's notes, interesting, give you an idea of maybe what to do. It doesn't really feel like, between the rules and the player's notes, I didn't feel like I walked away with a good idea of what I'm trying to do in the game terribly. But that may be more me. Designer's notes, nice. I really like seeing a set of designer's notes, a couple pages of them. Helps a lot. Helps a lot of understanding what the design was. Now this is less about the We the People design that it's based on, and more about why this changed. And I would prefer to also have the other design, but I can understand why you can't, reprint that. The rulebook itself, I thought was a wonder when I first opened it up. I thought, here's somebody who gets how to do the rules in GMT, and they're very pretty. There's no question about that. They read clearly. They appear to be indexed, although, again, the one time I tried using the index, it failed me. I was trying to look for fortified ports, and I don't see an indication of them, and there's no place in the rules where they're handled individually. And this is one of the problems I have with, I'm beginning to define it better because these are much better rules than most. Fortified ports are stuck into a couple of little rules here and there, but there's no clear reference, no place to go if you want to know what the hell does a fortified port do. I expect to see some indication at the beginning of the thing where they talk about the game map or the pieces, where that kind of information is given. It's not being given here. There's a glossary, which is useful. There's an index, which I guess, the things that I always need out of the index are never the things that are thought of. The things that I need out of the index, precisely the things that the designer didn't think needed their own rules. Because I can remember where a rule is and get within a couple of pages, and there might be a nice little picture that tells me where that rule is. All kind of useful stuff there. Well, The stuff in the index has to be the stuff that you didn't think was important enough to make a rule about. That's the stuff that needs the cross-indexing. That's the stuff that I'm going to spend hours, well, maybe not hours, but, over the course of this game, I probably spent at least a half hour to 40 minutes looking the rules over again after 2 readings. And there's another one. It's a 24-page rulebook. This isn't a complicated game. My first thought was, well, it's very clear, very good. This is the same GMT disease, which seems to afflict so many of their games. Big, colorful, fancy rulebook, sometimes well-worded, etc. In this case, definitely. But it just fails the basic example of what you need in a rulebook. I'm looking at the old ICE rulebook for Fellowship of the Ring. Now, Fellowship of the Ring is a much, much more complicated game, I would say. Outside of whatever effect the cards have, but the cards in this aren't that complex. About the same size, but dense, indexed. I don't feel like I'm going to have a problem coping with it. Not a problem at all. I don't know why we regressed to writing rule books. It's not just me. It can't be. Because I can handle a good heavy rule book. The OCS rule book was no problem at all. No problem at all. Yeah, I might miss something. But I know how to find stuff. I don't know how to find stuff in this. And I feel the same way with the Fellowship of the Ring. It doesn't have an index, but it appears to be well referenced. I need to know something. There's a number there to go look at it. There's just a discipline missing that even when you do it as right as you can, there's something that I need in a rule book that's not here. And that I'm persistently seeing, not just in GMT, but in a lot of the modern companies. Same way I used to see in companies like Games Workshop, which I would just kind of mock. I mean, they just didn't have an idea how to do rules. Well, now the whole industry seems to be moving in that direction. All right. What about the game itself? So, I wanted to compare two types of games. One, on the low end, skirmish. Basically a children's game, right? You roll some dice, you move your pieces, and your goal is pretty much to wipe out the enemy's forces. This is not quite that long in terms of both games have a lot of strategic thought. I'm just talking about in terms of the simplicity of the rule set. This definitely has a little bit more complexity than that. But then when I compare it to something like 1776, I realize these two games are not in the same league. I should not even make this comparison. And here, key among these is that base decisions in it aren't really abstracting what's going on particularly as creating a game mechanic in the case of the Go-like operations that doesn't really reflect anything that's intuitive at all. It may work in producing results that aren't ahistorical. I won't deny that. I see how it, I mean, it's not like I can point to it and say, ha ha, look, that's horrible, that's stupid. It's not. But it doesn't feel like I'm doing things that make sense. As the British player, why am I trying to surround this little community? Okay, that makes some sense. If I can convince all its neighbors to convert, I can see why it converts. But these larger territories, that doesn't make much sense at all to me. And I don't think it's possible, though, with reasonable players. That may not be me, but I don't think it's possible with reasonable players to capture this huge hunk of territory that way. I mean, it was a big deal when I'd take 2 or 3 areas. But my mindset is very Go-like, and I want it to capture the whole hunk. Now, what I'm wondering, and I'm never going to study the game enough to know this, is whether there's sort of defensive moves like in Go, just positions and places where you want to place just to create better shape. There's no two eyes though. There's no symmetry there because the American player loses first. So the British player can fill both eyes and watch the American formation fall apart. So I don't think it's going to have many of the feels of Go. A lot of the other stuff, very, very light. Much, much closer to the skirmish side. I would not say that this is... I mean, this is barely a war game, in my view. It's not much more so of one than skirmish is. Neither one really fits into what my concept of a war game is. But then again, it's clear the hobby has moved to expand and include the Columbia block games and things like this. So I would say this is on the very, very ultra-light end of wargaming. As such, I guess you can kind of step away and say, look, you know, these games don't have to be really historical. These games don't have to give you the mood that you're doing the kind of, that you're faced with the kind of decisions, the commanders that you're portraying, we're faced with. Okay, fine. But it's that kind of rationalization, that kind of concept, which drives me away from Euros. I'm not saying that this is bad. I think I can actually enjoy it. I'm saying it's not got a lot of my respect because it's putting an overlay onto of historicity onto a situation where the game just can't hold it up. The gameplay itself, it is primarily a game. And I think it's probably a pretty good game, but it's a terrible war game. So, again, I'm not sure. I may give this a decent amount of play. I'm going to probably, I rated it immediately a 5. I think I'm going to probably up that to a 6 under some kind of protest. I think it's a much more playable and fun game than a lot. I think in 20 years, when I recognize that it's a classic, I may like it the same way I like, say, Brightonfield. I have to experience games that are like this, but I like a lot less to start rating it higher. Brightonfeld, I probably enjoy no more than I enjoy this, but again, a rating of 7. Largely because I've seen so many games like that. The very simple move in combat when adjacent on a CRT that it didn't spark anything in me, and Brightonfeld does, and this does as well. So maybe this should have the same, but no, it's a matter of in the pack. I have to compare this against other CDGs, things like Here I Stand, that I really, really like. I enjoy it more than Paths of Glory, though, I'll tell you that much. I've got hopes for the People, even though that's also Mark Herman. The rulebook looks much, much thicker. It looks like it's taking a lot more into consideration and may be more to my taste, more of a war game than this is. Overall, I totally get why people like this. Just like I can look at Euros and say I totally get why you enjoy them. I could be somewhat hooked on them and say, wow, that's a really cool system, that's interesting. And one of the reasons that's keeping the rating a little lower is this isn't We the People. We the People, even though I might like it even less, and I bought this because I thought this would be a somewhat heavier version of it. Has a certain distinction for being first. And I definitely would push ratings a little bit for something like that. This is not first. This is a redesign. It's a different game. It's definitely different enough that it's a different game, but it does. Even though it's got a lot of similarities, it doesn't earn that same mantle of respectability. Just like Advanced Third Reich does not earn whatever respect I gave to Third Reich. It has to stand or fall on its own merits, and I think it stands. But all right. Well, you know, on the plus side, I'm pretty sure I am going to enjoy. Oh, I had some notes that I may not have covered. Oh yeah. So here are some of the big gripes that I had. The Go tactics I already explained. I don't buy what they represent. I don't buy the designer's argument for them. I think they're purely a gamey mechanic that doesn't violate the historical results badly, but in no way really represents what anybody was trying to do. Then the second is that play doesn't affect victory or recruiting. What do I mean there? Well, so how you play on the board clearly affects victory, but it doesn't affect it until victory is important. Which is to say, it's not at all important how many colonies you hold. The minor advantage that you get out of militia in a colony, given how few battles are actually fought, I think does not represent well the extent to which it was valuable to hold a colony, production-wise. Just convincing people. You know, the owner actually helps to convince those around. If an area was strongly pro-loyalist and never really dealt with rebel forces in it, it might have been, it tended to be harder to convert that area over the long term. Areas that were in turmoil, that swung back and forth, got used to that and were less resistant to whoever came in. I think that's an aspect that is important to cover. More importantly, though, is production. It's just off your cards. I mean, so the militia cover the Tory production, I think, fairly well. They do not cover the Continental production well. That absolutely relied on territories being controlled. And that's not at all reflected in the game. You can get more troops pretty much no matter how well or poorly you're doing. And that's an aspect I don't like. I also don't like, as I said in, I think, the previous video, I don't like the fact that it seems predetermined and decided Britain can't win. They just can't win. No matter how well they're doing there, whether or not the French came into the war, Lord North's government's going to fall and the game is over. And now, obviously, if the government of Britain falls, that is not going to be a case where the rebels are going to say, "Oh yeah, well, Lord North's gone. We're cool. We'll come back." No, I mean the assumption here is America will be formed, and it's just how well can you do within that. To me, that's disappointing as a goal, and not necessarily historically deterministic. I think that there are reasons to argue that the colonies could have been put down. It may involve things that are beyond the scope of the merely military, though. And that would be a game I'd like to play. All right.